So there's lots of different reasons why we're all here tonight in the Union Theatre. And each of those reasons is part of our personal story. As some of you might know, Melbourne Playback is very big on personal story. Personal story joins communities together, it's a way of communicating, it's a way of understanding each other. And tonight we have our own little community here in Union Theatre, each with our own personal stories and our own connection to why we're here tonight. We're very, very lucky because we have 4 amazing panellists who are out the back listening to me calling them amazing, and probably telling me off for it, who are here to share what they know about climate change. You'll then get a chance to ask them questions. I'll facilitate that. I'll then hand over to the lovely Danny Diesendorf and he will facilitate a Melbourne Playback show for you all. How does that sound? Excellent. All right, well, Nussie, enough chatting. Fair enough, Nussie. Let's introduce our panellists. We have Professor David Karoly. We also have Dr. Stephen Bygrave. Come on out, guys. Stephen Bygrave. We have Marita Davies, and we also have Isabella Morand. Can you please give them a round of applause? Aren't they great? Excellent. All right, to start us off, we are first of all going to hear from Professor David Karoly. A few sentences on him. He is a Professor of Atmospheric Sciences in the School of Earth Sciences and the ARC Centre of Excellence for Climate System Science at the University of Melbourne. He is an internationally recognised expert in climate change and climate variability. His claims to fame are that he used to be just like Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory, and he went to the high school where Summer Heights High was filmed. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor David Karoly.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I have to talk to you now about how I'm no longer Sheldon and how I actually grew up. And, well, maybe, but probably not. But what happened was I realised that as Sheldon, there's a quite limited audience that you can talk to and explain what you're interested in. And I was really interested in outdoor activities and the environment. And when I was doing low temperature solid state physics, no one understood it at all. And what I wanted to do was to be able to explain what I was doing to my mother. She was always the most important person for me. And I realised that everyone had an interest in the weather. Everyone had an interest in the climate. And suddenly I realised that if I did maths and I did physics, I could apply it to understanding the behaviour of the atmosphere. Fast forward a decade, maybe a bit more than a decade, and in 1987 I was doing research on climate variations and climate change and trying to disprove this newfangled idea that increases in greenhouse gases were having an impact on the climate. This was in the mid-1980s. Climate change was not a major news item then. And I was a mad scientist who thought everyone else was wrong and that climate change due to increasing greenhouse gases just wasn't happening. I looked at temperature data from all around the southern hemisphere, and the more I looked, the more I found that even in the mid-1980s there was already a significant impact from increases in greenhouse gases on the observed climate. My first research paper got published in 1987 showing that human influences were already affecting the climate. And since that time, in the next, well, up to the present, 30-something years, what we've now seen is that there is no doubt that human activity is changing the climate system. That increases in greenhouse gases due to burning fossil fuels and land clearing and other industrial activities are changing the climate. The only people that doubt that are experts like Andrew Bolt and the Prime Minister when he's away from the public. And the Prime Minister has said over and over again, coal is good for humanity. And what I have to remind him and our audience is there are some things he got right, but the tense is wrong. Coal was good for humanity. We're going to hear from Stephen and from lots of other people that there is now a much better solution. But we do know that if we keep burning coal, if we keep using fossil fuels, if we keep deforesting the planet, climate change will get significantly worse. We know that as we continue our current way of life, using coal to generate electricity, it produces more and more greenhouse gases, they stay in the atmosphere a long time, and it causes long-term impacts. And all the impacts that scientists like myself have been projecting for long into the future are already happening. They're the things we've been experiencing in Victoria in the last 10 years. More hot extremes, more bushfires, more heavy rain events, increases in sea level causing coastal erosion. We are seeing all those already. And what we do know is that as we emit more greenhouse gases, climate change ramps up even more, and the impacts get bigger. We also know we have choices, but these choices need to be made very, very soon. Preferably 10 or 20 years ago, but we can't switch the clock back 10 or 20 years. We're here and now. And the choices we have are like Goldilocks, but we don't have a just right planet to go back to. We have a planet that is warmer or a planet that is disastrously warm. And that disastrously warm is 4 to 6 degrees warmer. That's what we get when we follow the Gina Reinhardt scenario, which is dig it up and burn it as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, that also seems to be the scenario for many members of the current government. And a significant fraction of the Labor Party as well. We just have to make sure that we follow the other choice. And that other choice can limit global warming to less than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. But that is still a disastrously different planet with significant sea level rise affecting many low-lying communities. It's a significant impact which increases temperatures, which increases heat waves in Victoria and Melbourne. But what we have to do is we have to make choices now, because the long-term impacts are such that the planet that we will live on will be a different planet than we've ever experienced. We can come back to Big Bang Theory. Sheldon is still in the back of my mind. And the planet that we're looking at, if we follow this business as usual scenario, looks a lot more like Venus. It isn't Venus, it's just really hot, and we don't destroy humanity, we just don't provide enough space for people to grow food and for people to live on, so that the planet is a very, very different place. That seems to be what a large number of the current government want, but I don't. I think the majority of Australians don't want it. The majority of the people around the world prefer to live in this planet with its current climate, or as close as we can get. So the choices we have and the decisions we make now about our energy use and about our lifestyles will determine what we experience, what our children experience, and those choices and how we achieve them. I'm going to leave that to everyone else to answer those questions, because it's too hard for me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm going to push right on, because there are many more important, interesting people than me up here on the stage. Next, we have Dr. Stephen Bygrave. He has worked on climate change for 20 years across renewable energy, energy efficiency, transport, agriculture and forestry. He is the CEO of Beyond Zero Emissions, which has the aim of transforming Australia's economy to one based on renewable, clean technology. In the 2000s, he built a house in the forest using natural and recycled materials. Dr. Stephen Bygrave, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, it's always a pleasure to speak after David, because I always start my speeches saying we accept the science, and Stephen great to be here tonight after David, because you've all heard about the science, and David is a world-renowned expert on climate science, and BZE, Beyond Zero Emissions, we absolutely accept the science, and our job is to say we have solutions and to identify those solutions that can be implemented right now, because as David says, we actually don't have time to wait. We should have been taking very strong action some time ago, if not a decade, 2 decades ago. And there's always this excuse that we don't have the technology, we need to wait for some breakthrough in some technology that will save humanity. Our argument is that we actually have the technologies right now, and we can't wait any longer. So our vision is a zero emissions Australia, a zero emissions planet actually, in 10 years. And we've shown how this can be done across all sectors of the economy, including agriculture, energy, buildings, transport, etc. And you might be aware that there's now an international push for a limit of 2 degrees warming by the end of this century. We believe that 2 degrees is too high. We're already seeing the impacts of almost 1 degree increase, and that those impacts include bushfires, droughts, floods, and all the extreme weather events that we've been experiencing for some time. So you can imagine a world which David has outlined, which could be 4 to 6 degrees, if not higher, warmer to that kind of level, and that's a pretty scary place. The World Bank has said that a world that is 4 degrees warmer by the end of the century will not support our current institutions, societies, and way of civilized society. So you can imagine what will happen. It's kind of Game of Thrones space. It's pretty uncivilized, in fact. So we need to be getting on with it, and we need to be going. 2 degrees is too high. Our work is showing how we can actually go beyond zero emissions. Even many of the world's leaders are now saying we need to go to net zero emissions in the second half of this century in order just to get to 2 degrees warming. So this is going to be a huge challenge for humanity, but it's also something that can be done. We have renewable energy now in Australia, which has rooftop solar has the highest penetration rate in Australia than anywhere else in the world, thanks to our colleagues mostly in South Australia, where that's just going gangbusters. We've shown that we can actually transition to 100% renewable energy in Australia in a 10-year period. I was in Canberra last night where I saw Mark Butler speak, the opposition spokesman for environment and climate change. As you know, Labor has announced a 50% renewable energy target by 2030. I said to Mark, I asked him a question, I was in the audience, I said, Mark, that's great, what about 100%? Because in fact, we were heading for 28% renewable energy in this country by 2020 until Tony Abbott interfered with the target. I actually had the fortune of designing that target back in government in the late 1990s. And the aim of that target was to set long-term investment signals so the renewable energy could make long-term 15, 20-year investments which are required to bank a project. You need that kind of long-term signal. So when you play with the market, like the current government's done, you send all sorts of disinvestment and uncertainty in the market and send very negative signals to renewable energy companies who are aiming for a 20% target, if not a 28% target. So we were easily going to get 28%, which means 50% is a no-brainer by 2030. In fact, if you just keep the current growth of renewables at its current state, you will get 50% by 2030. So 100% is certainly ambitious, but we've shown it is achievable. We've also shown that we've busted a lot of myths about renewable energy. So there's this myth that the Prime Minister says, and Tony and Joe Hockey, that renewables don't work when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. So there's technology such as concentrated solar power, which stores energy in molten salt technology overnight, which can generate 24-hour power. There's technology such as pumped storage hydro, where you can pump seawater using wind technology during the day, pump it up to a turkey nest dam, release the water from that dam overnight when the wind isn't blowing, and thereby get 24-hour power, base load generation. So this is technology that can meet all of our needs. In fact, with rooftop solar and the penetration rates in Australia, we're seeing wholesale prices actually fall. We're also seeing during peak periods, prices drop because solar is running in the day when everyone's turning their air conditioners on. So in fact, renewables offer an enormous opportunity in this country, and as you know, we're endowed with such vast resources here. That's energy. We've also looked at things like electric vehicles, high-speed rail, which provide real alternatives to transport. These technologies can be powered by a grid, which is based on 100% renewable energy. If you get a grid that's based on 100% renewable energy, then you can have cars, you can get trams, you can get buses, you can get high-speed rail, transporting ourselves between Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Canberra on zero emissions electricity. The hard one's agriculture, and one of the hardest things is talking about what decisions we make as individuals about what we eat. Red meat and beef, the beef industry is probably the second, if not the highest, emissions intensive activity in our country. So I don't want to make you feel guilty or anything, but I no longer eat red meat. Neither does Mark Butler, I found out last night, mainly because of climate change. We've shown that we can actually go to zero emissions agriculture by stopping land clearing, which by the way, the Howard government tried to do and was quite successful prior to the Kyoto conference, which is why we got such an easy target actually in the Kyoto conference of 108%, an increase in emissions. And we got that, Australia got that, because John Howard argued that we'd stop land clearing. And by the way, that was happening in Queensland until Campbell Newman came in and reversed the land clearing laws. So stopping land clearing will actually reduce our emissions by 100 million tonnes a year. Huge amount. Reducing livestock numbers by about 20%. Improving the times in which we burn savanna landscapes in the north of Australia. And also more effective manure management, soil management, and then reforesting only 13% of Australia's landmass, which is steep or degraded or suffering from salinity. We can actually move to zero emissions agriculture. We've also looked at zero emissions buildings. We've got an initiative called Energy Freedom, how every home can be energy free, how every home can be a net energy producer, not a consumer of energy. And I'll just make a small plug. We're launching a book, The Energy Freedom Home, on Sustainable House Day on the 13th of September. So if you're interested in that, please go to our website. We'll be launching that book. And it's quite an exciting book. It shows how in 9 easy steps, only 9, every home can be retrofitted to be zero emissions. And 8 of those steps are energy efficiency. And the last step, the 9th step, is putting rooftop solar, just an average 4.5 kilowatt system on your roof. So this can all be done. I asked Mark Butler last night about electric vehicles because he comes from Port Adelaide. And as you know, the current government said that we won't have car manufacturing in this country anymore. So I said to Mark, well, what about electric vehicles? Isn't this a great opportunity to retrofit those factories which have been making Holdens and Fords and Toyotas and other things into making electric vehicles? You'd create jobs, you'd retain the 25,000 jobs that we have in this country currently in the automotive industry, and you'd be building an industry of the future, if not of the present. This is what Elon Musk has done in the USA. Tesla has bought mothballed factories in the USA, in Detroit, and refitted them to be making the Tesla Model S's and other vehicles. These vehicles actually are as high performing as the traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. They have ranges now of 500 kilometres, so there's no excuse about them not being able to meet our travel needs. And by the way, our individual travel needs on average are only about 38 kilometres when we do our average car trip. So a vehicle, even with a range of 100 kilometres or 130 kilometres like the Nissan Leaf or the Mitsubishi Maev will actually meet more than enough of our daily travel needs by car. So we're very much about solutions. I don't know what the time is. Trying to wrap up. We can do it. We have to do it because, as I mentioned, the world, which is even 2 degrees warmer by the end of this century, if not 4 to 6 to 8 degrees, which is where we're heading in a business as usual scenario, we need to be doing it. And so please, we'll probably hear from other speakers, but I'm going to say please keep applying political pressure, keep doing what you can in your homes and how you transport yourselves and maybe what you eat, because together we can actually do this. We're working with Byron Shire Council, one last thing, and showing how a community can actually move to zero emissions as well, because individuals, communities, in the absence of national government action, can actually do a hell of a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next we have Isabella Morand. Isabella is a climate activist and coordinator of 350.org Australia. She studied international relations and has previously worked in sustainable investment research. Her passion is the capacity of grassroots action and strategies to counter climate crisis in the face of government apathy. A couple of years ago, she went to Nepal and saw the glaciers melting firsthand. In that moment, she realised just how important action on climate change is.
I'm apparently the only noob that bought notes, so I'm just over here. Thanks for having me and thanks everyone for coming along tonight. I'd like to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Climate change is an issue about justice, in my opinion, and I think it's really important to remember where we've come from when we start to think about the world that we want to move towards. I'm here tonight to talk about the role that grassroots activism has to play in solving the climate crisis. I'm the Melbourne coordinator of an organisation called 350.org, which is a role I've been doing for the last 14 months or so. It's voluntary, as is most of our organisation. We're very small in Australia, about 10 paid staff, and everyone else is just on the ground doing our bit. The name of our organisation, 350.org, comes from the understanding that if we have 350 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we have that chance of keeping global warming below 2 degrees. As the others have said, even this target would be a disaster for millions of people around the world, including our neighbours in the Pacific Islands. And just as an aside, currently carbon dioxide is around 400 parts per million, higher than it's been since long before human beings inhabited the Earth. 350 was started in the US in 2008, and we now exist in over 180 countries around the world. Despite having such a large reach, the thing that I love about my organisation is that it remains grassroots and mobile. We're more concerned with protecting people and our message and planet than growing our brand. We have one major message and 2 key campaigns for delivering this. As the others have mentioned, we know that to limit global warming, the majority of the world's fossil fuels need to stay in the ground. Oil, gas, and especially coal need to be phased out as soon as possible and replaced with clean, renewable sources of energy. Our campaigning is based around helping frontline communities defend against new fossil fuel projects and around fossil fuel divestment. That's what we're most known for, and I think what I was meant to be speaking about tonight, so I'm going to give a little quick overview of the logic of divestment. Fossil fuel companies and governments around the world have around 2,800 gigatons of carbon dioxide in their reserves. Scientists and people much smarter than me, including the IPCC, have said that we can burn about 565 gigatons to keep below that safe 2-degree level. And that's to have a good chance of staying below that level. So to put it simply, the fossil fuel industry plan to burn 5 times more carbon dioxide than we can to even have a chance of staying relatively safe, which is pretty bad. And it also is a massive financial risk. So that pre-priced in the market amount is $28 trillion, and the amount that is safe to burn is $6 trillion. This is obviously a huge bubble, but as well as a financial risk, we consider it a moral question. There's this argument that if it's wrong to wreck the planet, it's wrong to profit from that wreckage. And to me, it's just so compelling. And one of the things that first got me into climate action It's quite obvious, but I'd never heard it put so simply before I came across 350. So the question is, where is this money? Actually, a lot of it belongs to us, or is in some way controlled by us. In our banking, superannuation, and direct investments. Super in Australia is the largest industry, $1.8 trillion. Only 2% of this is in renewables, and 55% is in fossil fuels. We've created a website called Super Switch, where you can go and see where your super fund is investing, and there's tools built into it so that you can pressure them to move away from fossil fuels. Superannuation is a notoriously secretive industry, so even getting the information from them on where your money is invested can be quite difficult. And they're not used to hearing from their members, so even just the few hundred people that have got in touch early in this campaign have been enough to really stir the pot. Many funds are looking into their investments and looking into how to create a fossil-free portfolio, and it's a really exciting space. Another way that's very clear to align your money with your morals is banking. Since 2008, the Big Four banks have loaned over $36 billion to fossil fuel projects in Australia. Along with our friends in Market Forces, we encourage people to put their banks on notice or to divest to a fossil-free bank. There's many. In the last 6 months, we've had a particular focus on the Commonwealth Bank. This is because they were the only bank who had been publicly linked to Adani and the development up in Queensland of the Carmichael mine and the Abbott Point project, and all the coal in the Galilee Basin, which, if we dig up, will be a complete disaster for the climate, as well as the Great Barrier Reef and the people whose land it is up there. What that has looked like is sustained pressure on the Commonwealth Bank, and it's been a really amazing campaign. A bunch of other organisations have been on board as well, including Greenpeace and the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, and we've put pressure on CommBank through a range of different ways. Online actions, direct action, sorry, I asked for a 5-minute warning. Having divestment actions as well as direct actions. We had a sit-in in the Commonwealth Bank in Melbourne. It lasted all day a few months ago. It was great fun, and we won, is the good news. So as many of you would have heard last week, Commonwealth Bank cut their ties with Adani, and the really exciting thing is that they said publicly that this was for environmental and social risk issues, which is not usually something that is uncritical. However, it's crucial to keep up the pressure to stop these projects being financed. We know that the government is pretty keen to ram them home. And we also know that all of the things that are being said about investment and jobs and stuff are highly exaggerated or outright lies. Just quickly, we are having another action tomorrow morning. So if you want to come along and give Commonwealth a little handshake to say thank you, but also encourage them to do more, you can meet us at the State Library at 10 a.m. Just quickly, some more stuff about the group in Melbourne. We really would love for people to get involved. I've got some sign-up sheets out the front. They look like Commonwealth Bank information sheets, but I promise they're sign-up sheets for us. They're being recycled from last week, so. We also do campaigning for institutional divestments. So the things I've been talking about are your own personal money, but last year we ran a campaign to get the City of Moreland to divest their banking from the fossil fuel, from the Big Four banks, and we won that as well. They were the first local government to make a commitment to really consider the fossil fuel in their investment. And this year we've got some more local government stuff. We're going to try and hit the Future Fund, who have a lot of money in fossil fuels, and we're going to be doing some actions around Paris with those big climate talks coming up at the end of the year. So divestment and direct action, which is what 350 does, is really about taking the power back. We've heard a little bit about the political climate in Australia in terms of climate action, and it is incredibly disheartening and can be very depressing. This is a problem people have been talking about my entire life, and all of a sudden, I'm 26 years old, and we've got this denialist government who give out billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies every year, have disappointing targets for reduction, cut the renewable energy target, and there's a revolving door between the fossil fuel industry and state and federal politics. For me, there's not really a choice when it comes to being involved in climate action. I feel morally responsible to do something. And it turns out, though, it can be really fun. And the reason that I'm not just incredibly depressed about the world that I'm going to grow up into is that there is amazing courage and passion and dedication amongst the grassroots climate activists in this country, and we have our own power and we can make our own way, and there are all these solutions as shown by Stephen, and people can just, you know, get involved, and we're just going to do it without the government. So I'd encourage you to come along with us.
Thank you, Isabella. And last but not by no means least, we have Marita Davies. Marita is a writer and arts producer specialising in Kiribati and the Pacific. Her website, thelittleislandthatcould.com, is dedicated to Kiribati and predicted to be, dedicated to Kiribati, which is predicted to be one of the first countries to disappear due to climate change, and all the issues that face it, including women, health, domestic violence, and climate change. Her first children's book, Tauti and the Wall, tells the true story of a Kiribati woman battling to build a wall to protect her home from rising seawaters. She is 16th generation Kiribati, and her birthday is on the country's Independence Day. Marita Davies.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I feel a bit funny. I was sort of smiling when you're talking about something so depressing as Kiribati drowning, but I'm really ramped up from Isabella's speech. So I've got this big smile on my face on such a depressing issue. So I'm coming at this with a more personal story, and I've really loved hearing the facts that have been thrown around me tonight. I suppose I'm coming to you guys speaking about what I do, and I'll just kind of go into it. I've been writing about Kiribati for over 6 years now. It started off as a bit of a cultural exploration for me, and then it's just, I didn't think it would last this long, and it's just going and going and going. But this year, I had the experience of, there was the Climate Festival going on in Melbourne, and one of the organisers came to me and said, can you do something? Can you contribute to this in any way? And obviously I said yes, without having any idea of what I could do. And then, so I said I'd produce a short film, a short documentary, which then led to me ringing up my mum saying, you need to sit in front of a camera and I need to make something, anything. So I interviewed her, and we were having this nice old chat in front of camera, and I had to focus on climate change, and I kept chatting to Mum, and I just gotten to this point where she kept talking about the land that we own in Kiribati on the main island of Tarawa, and she was really frustrated that day about the wall that surrounds our home, because for the last 25 years we have been building this wall, I suppose like a fence, to keep the rising seawaters from flooding our house, our two houses that sit on the land there. Anyway, she kept saying, oh, this wall, and I'm so frustrated about this wall, and I'm working on it every day, and then I got a call from your uncle, and he said he couldn't do it, and then I need someone else to build this, and I need to send money. And I just said, Mum, shut the fuck up about the wall and talk about climate change. So, took me a while to sink in that suddenly that this was the issue, obviously. So we started speaking about this wall, and she was so frustrated about building it that we kept talking about it after the interview had been shot, and Mum was just expressing her frustration about it, really sort of having a bit of a bitch about family, saying, this person did this, and then this person didn't ask what I want them to, I'm going to have to go back over there and talk about the wall. Anyway, so to write my thoughts down, I wrote it down really simply what she was saying. And then again, I got asked to speak at something else, and they said, what are you going to talk about? And I lied and said, I've written a children's book. hadn't. And they said, great, if you could talk about that. And I said, it encompasses climate change and blah, blah, blah. They said, if you could talk about that and you could sell the book, that would be perfect. I was like, absolutely, I can do that. And then I kind of ran home and was like, oh my gosh, why do I do this to myself? So I wrote the words that I'd written down in idea that thinking that this might be something one day turned into Towdy on the Wall. Which is this, I got it done. So it is, Towdy is my mother, and it is about the wall that surrounds our house. And I begged a wonderful friend of mine who's an illustrator and graphic designer, and said, I can't pay you, but there's glory, I don't know. So we ran a possible campaign, and we had this campaign, and the response was just so overwhelming. The support we got from this to raise the funds to print this was just, it honestly blew my mind. And the thing that I really wanted to share with you guys today is that when you give something to people that they could, is that a 5 minute? When you give something to people and you give them something tangible, when you can say, this, if you buy this, you are helping spread the word, you are doing something for the environment, you are reaching, I think, the most important audience that's out there, people really grasped at it. And it really, really surprised me because I just didn't think, I thought maybe some people would buy it, but the amount of people that contributed to this, it was just, we raised $4,000 in 6 days to get this thing printed, and then the money just kept flowing in. So it was just, it was really fascinating to see that also the types of people that came together to get this done, just because I said it's just a children's book. All I want you to do is read about it, and if they ask a question, research it, and then you learn it and the kids can learn it. That's all I'm asking. But I just think there really is a lot of people out there that are looking for some way that they can contribute positively to the environment and spreading this word. We just need to think of it. I'm just coming at it from a really creative way, and I'm trying to think of more ways that I can do this. But I think just finishing on a positive note, I just think there's a lot of people out there that are really supportive of this. Really supportive of this. And a lot of people are supportive of this even when they don't realise they are. Just sell it to them in a book that's got pretty colours and tell them to read it to their kids, and they love it. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of share that story because I think it's, as much as we've got a lot of hard work to do, there's people out there that really, really do want to support this. People that you don't expect. So don't doubt them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. Fantastic. Thank you, all our panellists. We now have 10 minutes, just 10 minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions for our panellists. Now, I'm going to be difficult and keep everyone short so we can fit in lots. That's my plan. Hello? Oh, hi. I'm going to give this to you guys so you can pass it along. Who's got hands? Here we go. Isabella has hands. David says Isabella has hands. Danny said we can go to 15. This is Danny Diesendorf. He's organised all of tonight. We'll be facilitating the playback performance part of the show, and he just said we can have 15 minutes, so I'm very excited. We've already got hands in the air. Yes, sir. Who would you like to ask a question to?
Well, I'll direct this to David and Stephen.
Great. Can we all hear all right, or do we need a microphone? Oh, because yeah.
Naomi Klein recently
did a book, and she's going to be speaking here at the Melbourne Writers' Festival on climate versus capitalism. And at least for me, as an anthropologist who's been working on climate change for the last 10 years, global capitalism is the elephant in the room. And even if we, let's say, go to renewable energy and put solar panels in everybody's home and electric cars and things like that, there's a lot of embedded energy in that. And so I'm wondering whether we need, how would the two of you, or the other people on the panel for that matter, grapple with what I consider to be the elephant in the room, global capitalism. Are we at a historical juncture that we need to move to an alternative world system based on social justice, parity? Because it's fine for us to have our nice homes and our electric cars in Australia, but there's one of the speakers talked about climate justice. So social parity, democratic processes, environmental sustainability, and climate. So is it time to move on beyond the existing global economy?
Hot spare.
Hot spare. Thank you very much.
Well, Steve, you can answer that one. I'm generous. I know Hans a lot.
Look, it's a great book, and Naomi refers to Beyond Zero Emissions on one of the pages in the work we've done, so that's really kind of her. Yeah, look, it's her thesis, I guess, or her angle is that capitalism is, you know, it's capitalism versus climate, and kind of this philosophy that endless growth is not sustainable, and particularly endless economic growth. And there are many, many people, eminent people, much more eminent even than David, who have said that, you know, we can sustain our livelihoods with zero growth. I don't really want to get into a socialist versus communist versus capitalist kind of debate because I'm not an expert in that area. But what we're trying to say is that renewables, energy efficiency, zero emissions agriculture, high-speed rail, all of these solutions are available right now. And they don't necessarily have to involve increased economic growth, and they don't necessarily need to involve a decline in our standard of living. In fact, you know, there are many organisations that look at GDP and go, that's not the way we should be measuring our standard of living. The UN has a well-being index, Bhutan has their own happiness index. Much better measures than capitalist measures of what really sustain us as humans. You know, human contact, community, rest, interaction with each other. There are all these things that capitalism and economic growth do not provide. So look, I think it's a great book. I'm also really looking forward to hearing Naomi next week after, early August. Yeah, 3 weeks. And she and her organisation, I think she's also launching a movie very soon as well. I'd encourage all of you to read the book if you haven't already. It does raise some challenges, I guess, how we make that transition, because capitalism isn't going to end overnight. I think the two things I really took away from the book were there's been a whole bunch of lost opportunities because the environment movement probably wasn't as effective as what it could have been, particularly in the United States. For example, when we had the, this will just be the last comment I'll make because I'm sure you've got lots of other questions. When we had the global downturn in the 2009, 2008, 7, 8, 9, there was a huge opportunity when the banks were bailed out. And Naomi makes this really clear point that instead of bailing the banks out, Obama should have bailed the banks out with a whole bunch of conditions. And that would have been an opportunity to reset the clock and reset some of the settings which are now just keeping on going on. So that's probably the biggest message I took away from that book.
Thank you, Stephen. Did you have something to say, Isabella? Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. This is touched on in the book, but just for everyone else, I think one of the really interesting things about the climate crisis and the solutions that are offered is that they give us a path to a much different world that doesn't necessarily rely on capitalism in the same way. You know, we talk about renewable energy. You can deregulate the energy market. You can own it yourself. There's all these kind of new methods of production and stuff which will make a cleaner and better climate, but will also make probably a more equal and better world.
Great, thank you, Isabella. There's someone who's had his hand up the whole time.
I'm a loud voice, you don't.
Great. What's your name?
My name's Mark Hudson. I'm doing a PhD on the coal industry defending itself, Australian and probably German coal industries. Very quick point. Nugget Coombs and Hugh Stretton were talking about the need for zero growth, conservative society in the 1970s. Question to David and question to Isabella. David, when or if are scientists going to come out and say, you know what, we're committed to 4 degrees? Kevin Anderson, who's in Manchester, has been saying 2 degrees is unlikely for 6 or 7 years. Other scientists are just now starting to say that. Is it 3 years' time, 5 years' time? I don't know. My question to Isabella, and I have great admiration for your passion, and I used to have it too. I was involved in the English climate camp movement from 2006 for a while. And my question to you is, have you considered what happens to people like you with burnout, and what message that sends to other activists, and how grassroots, anti-capitalist, or whatever you want to call it, activism can be sustainable for the individuals and attractive to other individuals, because otherwise you'll have a great defeat or a great victory, and after that great defeat or great victory, you will not be available for the next battle, and you know what? The capitalists will be. And the mining industry is down, but it is not out. Do not underestimate it. So, those 2 questions.
David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I might even have a go at the second one, because the first one's pretty easy. I mean, you're absolutely right. We've got enough greenhouse gases in the atmosphere already to cause more than 2 degrees warming. We actually have to suck out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere if we're going to avoid 2 degrees. And that's what can happen long term as we go to negative net emissions. But every tonne of coal that stays in the ground prevents further warming above 2 degrees, and so that's why I'm still keen to push for more coal staying in the ground, for more reductions in emissions, and for all that to happen as quickly as possible. As I said, I've been working in this probably longer than Isabella's been alive, and I'm what Bob Brown would say is beyond depression. Not my saying, it's Bob Brown's saying. He's a lot older than me and he's still pushing. And the reason is, I know the science, I know what needs to be done, and if I find it too hard, how can I expect anyone else who doesn't know as much to keep working on this area? Because I know there are solutions. There are lots of easy things, and Stephen's talked about them. So what we have to do is, as you say, continue in a way that allows us to sustain our activities. In the 1990s, the Australian government had a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20% below 1990 levels by the year 2000. Not the year 2030, 20% below 1990 levels by the year 2000. And they lost it because the coal. Then, just a few years ago, we had a carbon pricing mechanism, and everyone thought that's going to save Australia, and some of the activity of the, if you like, community groups waned, and then all of a sudden, changing government, and we've lost a lot of progress. So, you're absolutely right, we need continued action, we need to be beyond depression.
Yeah, you're right, and look, if anyone has any tips on sustainable activism, I would love to hear them, because it's hard, it's really hard. And I think, like, the best thing that I can say is the more people that get involved and the more diverse the movement is, the more energy there is, and the easier it is to keep going, because you have someone there to have your back, and you can take a week out and, you know, someone else will pick up your tasks for you. And just on that, I want to kind of tie back to the Naomi Klein thing, because there is this kind of long overdue, in my opinion, moment in the movement now where we're starting to realise that
you know, climate change for some reason has remained this issue of the Greenies when really it's an issue for everyone, and particularly an issue for the left, and we really need to be better at building alliances with unions and with faith groups and with kids and teachers and everyone, and you know, I think that work and that organising and community building is a big part of what I enjoy about my role, and seeing new people get involved and learn new skills and try new things out is very rewarding, and hopefully all of you can come from this and do one small thing and tell your neighbours and blah, 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 blah.
Thank you, Isabella. We have time for one more question, and I'm wondering if there's a woman who would like to ask a question. Because I see there's a man telling the woman next to him what his question is. That's politics, right? Yes, we have a woman there. What's your name? Yeah, Carol. Carol, I'm coming up. What's your question, Carol?
I wanted to ask Stephen what Mark Butler said when you asked him about producing electric vehicles in Australia.
He mentioned that Greg Combay is actually working on this issue, and that they'll be producing something shortly. And you probably know that Adam Vance has been pushing pretty hard for this as well. As I said, it's an enormous opportunity to manufacture and to take the 25,000 odd people who work in the motor vehicle industry. And you know, you've got shipbuilding going under, you've got the coal sector and the two coal-fired power generators in Port Augusta being shut off. Huge opportunities to build solar thermal in Port Augusta. Huge opportunity to take the jobs in the motor vehicle sector and make electric vehicles. So, you know, shut down coal, build solar thermal, you know, stop manufacturing old dirty cars and start producing cars of the present that, you know, everyone else is using overseas. So let's hope. And if any of you are connected into that part of the world, please speak to your friends and colleagues and apply some pressure.
Thank you, Stephen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry that I have to stop our fantastic questions, but I'm under strict instructions to keep things tight, unfortunately. But don't worry, we do have a playback performance now, and as some of you may know, playback performances are based on personal stories, so we will still be getting a lot of information from all of you. Can you please thank our panel? We have Marita Davies, Professor David Karoly, Isabella Morand, and also Dr. Stephen Bygrave. Thank you so much for coming.